Lately, we've been seeing CIG talk a little bit about releasing Tier 0 assets to the game. Many of us recall the idea of there not being any more Tier 0. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, let's look at some of the new features they've been talking about a little bit in Inside Star Citizen recently.
3.18 is not the end of the cargo refactor. There's lots of stuff that we're in the design process for right now, including manual loading and unloading, as well as automatic loading and unloading. We're also looking at some big box cargo missions that separate the cargo from the hauling professions. So that's something to look forward to. We have a lot more content coming that use these new features. We hope you enjoy it in 3.18.
So there's the cargo stuff that's coming in, and some people feel it's a little undeveloped. It is something they've talked about. And I think overall, mostly we've settled on the idea that it's going to be just physicalizing cargo, which, yes, a little bit disappointing, but case in point. Now there's also the underground facilities we've seen recently. Let's listen to this.
Down into kind of content packs. So our Tier 0 is everything that we would need to release this into the universe, with some variation.
Okay, so cargo's not exactly Tier 0, but it's not exactly Tier 1, I think, from what we're expecting. And underground facilities clearly still have a Tier 0 as well. I think the first thing to think about when we see this is where do these features even land in terms of team development? We'll get to why that's important in a little bit, but if you look on here, USPU team is working on the cargo system refactor. We know that. That's actually who was just on the camera, the new lead to the USPU team. Thank you for your work. And then we've got the EU Sandbox team working on our underground facilities. As you can see, they're also working on cave archetypes and the new player experience a little bit. They're probably not the main team on it, but it is something that, that's who was just presenting it as well. So these are two teams, the USPU team and the, what was that? EU Sandbox team, that are both working on these features. There's nothing wrong with this. They're still doing what they said they were going to do when it came to the whole Tier 0, Tier 1 thing, and I'm going to show you why. Here's a little bit about the entire idea of the switch up from Tier 0 to Tier 1 from Richard Tyrer, the one who was, this guy was presenting to us at CitizenCon with Chris Roberts at the end of this last show.
Yes, and that's something that I think is very, the way I put it is that the core gameplay pillar, because it's not just active feature teams, the core gameplay pillar, which active feature team is probably the largest team on there, was Squadron prioritized, but PU focused. And now we are Squadron prioritized and Squadron focused, and we will be focusing on delivering those features to Squadron 42, proving them out, rounding them out, and then giving them to the content teams, which we would have done previously on the PU for them to implement those features into the PU unit, into the live release. Okay. Now, the significant difference here is the time frame by which that happens, and something I alluded to at the start, which is the tiering. In standard game development, where you're not working on a live product, you don't generally tier features.
Right.
You make a feature that is fit for purpose, and if it does the thing that you want it to do, you test it and you play it and you go, that is what I believe it to be. I'm happy with it. And you then utilize that feature across multiple levels, and that's what you do. So what we're going to do, what the fundamental change here is that active feature team and core gameplay pillar are going to make a feature, as we always have done, in the exact same time frame with the roadmap that we've had for the last 12 months, right? Then instead of it coming to the PU and Squadron simultaneously, what it's going to do is that it's going to come to Squadron first. And in Squadron, we're going to implement it and deliver it to create a final unified experience for Squadron 42. So trolleys or body dragging would have or melee combat would go to there, and we go, this is how we're going to use it in Squadron. This is how it's supposed to work. This is all of the things that we need the player experience. We test it, we play it, go through its approval channels, and get to a position where we're happy with it.
So you may have actually heard people kind of freaking out about this over the last year, talking about how, all the developers are moving to Squadron 42. They're now working on the PU. All their efforts are going towards this single player game no one cares about. And then also at the same time, we're now kind of getting to the point of, hey, you said no more tier 0. What's going on? Thought you guys were working on this in Star Citizen. It's a cut between the two is what he seems to be describing here. And when that happened, I expected there to be like a delay in that period of time where they would be like, okay, we're cutting off the last of the features that hit tier 0 from this specific team he's talking about. And we're going to keep going into detail. We're going to cut off these features, and everything from here on is going to Squadron first and then the PU. And in that like first, let's say 6 to 12 month period of those things testing in Squadron, we would feel a delay in the PU of these more polished features coming from these core gameplay teams into our hands. I think that we've already felt that, and I'll go into that more at the end of the video, but I think we're coming to the kind of the end of that delay. But first, I think we should talk about what he mentioned there, which was the content versus the feature teams. The easiest place to see this happening is the AI in the monthly reports. You always get a readout of the AI tech team, the AI features team, and the AI content team, and you can kind of watch how the features go from being developed in tech to being like actually turned into something usable in the features team. And then every once in a while you see it pop up into the content team, where it feels like those are the people who are working it into the actual game. They're the ones who are implementing it. And Richard, again, gives us a great run through of how this process actually happens when they're developing things for Star Citizen.
Example, melee combat or body dragging or trolleys. They're three really good ones that are fully functioning features. But if they were being used in an action adventure or Squadron or whatever, they would be integrated into like you're using them for a purpose. And we've released them into the wild to kind of get feedback and that, but they've not been fully utilized yet. And generally that's because on the core gameplay pillars, we will work on a feature and we'll work towards it becoming functional. And then once we have it, we will then coordinate with a content team. So generally, whether that's the locations team or UP, also, for example, healing needs hospitals, it needs medical beds. Or
so I think he actually said their EUPU would be a content team.
So generally, whether that's the locations team or EUP, also, for example, healing.
Yeah, so EUPU is actually a team that's working on some of the larger features and the kind of stuff that like we're talking about still coming in at T0. So like life support T0 is still being worked on. Technically, there's a reason for that. And that's what we're starting to hear about here with the split up between the feature actor team, or the actor feature team, sorry, and these other content teams.
It needs hospitals, it needs medical beds, or for, hacking's another example. We can release hacking, but that's just the game, the system. We've done all the UI, all the audio, the physical interactions of you putting the hacking chip in, but it still needs to have a purpose in the game. Like, well, where do you use it? When do you use it? It needs to go and have the chips in the shops. So we coordinate with what I call, like, we have feature teams, which is kind of what my pillar is set up to. We also have the weapon content team, which is a weapons pipeline. It does all the weapons and something, but we coordinate with the general content team to then push it in or create missions.
So that's what they were getting caught up before. It's like they were creating the features and also trying to create the content at the same time, and it did not work because they would get feedback from us on things that were not really complete, and it just wasn't super useful. So when we go back to the discussion about tier 0 items and which items would make to tier 1, listen to the examples he gives us.
Healing, we've got all of these different mechanics, so body dragging and stealth gameplay and radar and scanning and physical damage and fire and all of those things.
And you can see all of these things, radar and scanning, which was shown to us at CitizenCon, FPS radar and scanning, which actually also included a little bit of the interaction system, which we can see is now definitely has a more solid feel to it than I think what we've been used to in this whole tier 0 idea. We look at stealth gameplay. We've seen how they improved the idea of stealth gameplay with AI. We've been reading about it a lot in the monthly reports. We look at fire and how the fire hazard has become this thing that they've developed into something that can be a legitimate hazard, not just in damage, but in the way it takes up oxygen and all that kind of stuff. And even EVA, honestly, is another part of that team, as we'll see here in a second. These are all the kinds of things that you would find, which he had mentioned already, under the actor feature section. EVA 2.0, FPS radar, ladders, mantling, stuff like that. So what they said they were going to do is happening. They're doing it. And some of the stuff that they're making, unfortunately, is only for Star Citizen. And that's not going to reach tier 1 in the same way. It's simply not what they want to do. It sucks, but it's also great because these kinds of features, the ones that are coming from that core gameplay team he talked about, do look a lot better, especially in these recent showcases we got, where we get to see things like platforming, stealth gameplay, like I said, new ways that the AI are acting. All of this stuff is really good, and it's stuff that they told us was going to be happening about a year ago. But unfortunately, the rest of the company is not on that same development path, for better or for worse. I think there's a lot of discussion to be had around whether or not that's a good thing or not. But I think overall this has been good. And this change, the one that they talked about last year that we were expecting, was also retold to us again in the gnashing of teeth horrible roadmap update from the beginning of the year. They said the core gameplay killer pillar has moved to focus exclusively on Squadron 42 feature. That's what really threw people off. They thought this meant a bunch of developers had moved over to work on Squadron 42 and that work would not come to Star Citizen. Features developed by this team will be integrated into Squadron and then migrated over to the persistent universe. People kind of miss that. And if you look at the features they're talking about, player interaction experience, which we saw, FPS radar and scanning, which we saw, hacking, we actually have not seen hacking, but EVA T2 and zero-G push-pull, these are all things that they've started to demo and talk about. And we can see that they actually are making that transition over from Squadron. Was the delay in that worth it? That's for all of you to decide. I think the delay is coming to an end because now we're going to see the first features and they kind of get into a rolling mode of development where some of the core features, some of the first features are shipped while other ones are being worked on. And then, we start to stagger it. And something comes out a year from now, something comes out 2 years from now, something comes out, 17 months from now, whatever. I think the delay is coming to an end, but I think it's up to all of us to decide if that was even worth it for us or if we just wish they had kept doing what they were doing. Either way, I hope this cleared up a little bit of that tier 0, tier 1 confusion. I'm sure I got some things wrong and somebody will let me know in the comments, but have a good day.